Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Goodrum Show with me, Chris Goodrum. Okay, so as you can see from the title page, today we're having a look at the new Balblair range. So a big thank you to Gavin, the rep for Inverhouse Distillers, and Inverhouse Distillers for kindly supplying the samples. I know the guys at the distilleries will be watching this and at Inverhouse, so whether and I don't know whether the big wigs of Inverhouse actually watch my my humble reviews. Hopefully I'll still be on their Christmas card list after this. Anyway, so I wasn't actually intending to do a Balblair episode of the show this side of Christmas. In actual fact, the episode I was planning to do, unfortunately, is going to be delayed because of a missing sample. A sample disappeared in the post. So whoever's happened to have got that, I hope they're enjoying it. So basically I'll have to do that one next week, along with shooting the Christmas episode of the show next weekend as well, because that will be the last opportunity I have before Christmas to do any more episodes of the show. So it's going to be a heavy weekend. Anyway, enough of that. Let's talk about Balblair. So I mentioned a few months ago that the distillery had decided that they were going to have a revamp of their range, and the vintage dates that they used to carry were no longer going to be on the bottles. Now, okay, fine, I can live with that. Glenrothes decided they were going to go down that route as well, and I'm disappointed, shall we say. I mean, for years the distillery had basically said that these vintage dates matter, that they have a relevance, and now suddenly they don't have a relevance. They're irrelevant. They're confusing. The poor consumers don't understand. I mean, you know, what isn't there to understand? The vintage date was on the bottle. The bottling date was on the bottle or on the packaging. You know, a little bit of maths, you figure out what the age is, and to me, it was a point of difference. I mean, you know, if the spirit had been absolutely rubbish, the point of difference wouldn't have mattered. And for a number of whisky drinkers, they're quite au fait with the use of vintages. They're au fait with single cask bottlings, independent bottlings, things like that. And all right, okay, I'll argue the point that a vintage statement or date or whatever really doesn't matter a great deal at the end of the day. It was just basically to say, look, the juice in this bottle is 10 years old and it all comes from this year of distillation. Now, I would say that sort of maybe a summer versus a winter distillation you may well get may well be more relevant, but we all know that casks, you know, mature differently even if they're distilled on the same day and filled on the same day and all that kind of stuff. We know that whiskey is a living organism and doesn't sort of like, you know, mature in a linear fashion. We know that. And what I liked about Balblair was that they would release you know, say for example the 2005, for argument's sake, first release, 2005 second release, and you could say, well, okay, look, there's going to be subtle differences between the two, and they've decided, you know, to do a second release of the 2005 vintage. Although they did seem to sort of bottle continuously the first release, and then at some arbitrary point would decide it would now become the second release. So maybe this first and second release thing was actually sort of a little bit of a marketing thing, possibly, you know. So, you know, and like I said, you know, it was a good point of difference. It was to sort of say, look, you know, I mean, you know, we all know that sort of maybe back in the day, distilleries would, you know, vat in some older spirit into, say, their 10-year-old to give it a bit more guts, a bit more depth. I mean, we know that doesn't happen now. I mean, you know, distilleries are far too worried about their precious stocks of mature spirit to sort of warrant dumping it into a 10-year-old just to give it some, you know, some depth to it. You know, it's like, nowadays I think sort of master distillers and blenders are more into saying, look, this is the style of our spirit at 10 years old, rather than, you know, bolstering it. And also purely from a commercial point of view, you're going to get more money for bottling a cask of 16-year-old than you are basically vatting it in with a load of 10-year-old. So yeah, I guess at the end of the day, you could argue. I mean, I'm arguing against myself here, saying that vintage dates probably are a bit of irrelevance. But what I liked about Balblair was that was a point of difference. And you know what? You could have just put the vintage date somewhere on the label in not necessarily small letters. You could still have kept the vintage, 2005 10-year-old or 12-year-old or whatever was the case may be, rather than just becoming just like every other distillery and having a 10 or 12 or 15, Anyway, and now I'm just going to say forget all of that, because you know what's important is juice in the bottle, as I always say, and by and large they've not made any changes to the juice, bar the 12-year-old. Anyway, so let's just have a look at today's lineup. He'll remember your eyeglass. Okay, so we're going to kick off with the new 12-year-old. All of the 4 bottlings are bottled at 46%, so no colouring, no chill filtering, everything done properly, and you wouldn't expect anything less from John McDonald. And like I said, the 3 older age statements are all as per the old bottlings, or there or thereabouts. I mean, they were these are American oak and then finished in ex-Spanish oak. I mean, they don't say sherry because apparently they don't know whether they were all sherry butts or not. Okay, so doesn't matter. The only one that has changed is the 12-year-old. Now, this is a sort of replacement of the 2003, 2005, the younger bottling that they used to do. And it's American oak and what do they call it? Second fired? Why don't you just say recharred American oak? I mean, why did you have to let the marketing monkeys get in on that one? I mean, refired oak means nothing. It's Anyway, that aside, as far as I can remember, the bottlings it replaced never actually had any recharred American oak casks used. It was all, I would guess, probably a combination, probably all refill American oak, I would imagine. Although I think they have had a few bottlings that have been had some first fill, but primarily I would guess refill, and that just worked really, really nicely. And I'm a little bit sceptical, it has to be said, about the use of recharred casks. Sometimes, as you well know, recharring a cask can make the oak taste a little bit bitter, a little bit forced, and sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it's perfectly okay. So we shall see what that one's going to be like. Right, so the 15-year-old is aged in American oak and then finished in first fill Spanish oak casks. Now, I've always been impressed by John McDonald's ability to finish these casks now, and I'm guessing that they're not just all aged for, say, 10 years and then finished for 7 years. You get the feeling. I would imagine he basically creates a recipe of a variety of finished ages, because they're just so consistent, and I can't believe that you would get that consistency from going, yes, 10 years in an American oak cask, 5 years in a first fill Spanish oak cask, because it doesn't work quite like that. We know that. So I'm guessing that it's a blending together of various aged finished casks. But anyway, we shall see when we get to it. And bottling number 3 is the 18-year-old. Exactly the same manner of being put together as the 15, and would have replaced the 90s vintages that they would release. And finally, we're looking at the rather expensive bottling, the 25-year-old, lovely lavish packaging it comes into, slightly different shaped bottle as well. I mean, you would expect something of, well, I can't remember, what's it retailing for, about 500 quid, something like that. Quite a bit for a 25-year-old, and would have replaced the 70s vintages that they used to release. And again, American oak, first fill Spanish oak. So yeah, really looking forward to this. As you know, I'm a big fan of Balblair. I love their use of American oak and sherry. They're never sort of one-dimensional malts, and I can't see any reason why that's going to change just because they've dropped the vintage date. But we shall see. So let's make a start with the 12-year-old. Okay, so let's see what the 12-year-old gives us then on the nose. Crisp, fresh, white fruit, lime, a little bit of gooseberry, lovely sort of tight, minerally Highland note. But that recharred oak is a little aggressive. I mean, you can certainly smell the oak char, and it's not been ruined. I won't go that far, but I really don't see what it's added to it. All right, I suppose maybe John McDonald wanted a bit of an edginess to the 12-year-old, and personally, I think he's obviously achieved that. But for me, it's an unnecessary note. It doesn't really need to be there, and in actual fact it is slightly jarring. A little bit more coffee and toffee coming through now. This sort of give it a bit of time in the glass and the oak starts to sort of come through a little bit more, but I'm just having a hard time kind of getting past that slightly aggressive oak note, which, like I said, I really don't think needed to be there. Anyway, let's see what that's like. Full, barleyed, minerally, citric, white fruit, apricot. But again, that's just that aggressive oak note, which again just jars a little bit. I mean, it just kind of like, I mean, it's got a lovely length. It's got a little bit more of a citric note. The tannins kind of dry the finish a little more than I remember say the 2005, for example. It's got some nice vanilla, a little creaminess as well. I mean, the finish is relatively well balanced. And there's a touch of lime, a touch of gooseberry. It's a lovely complex spirit. But again, I don't really understand why this aggressive oak note was needed. I mean, maybe it's me, I don't know. I mean, I just loved the old bottling of Balblair. It was just wonderfully soft, citric, mineral, and you got the balance of sort of the barley, the minerality, the citrus. It was all really harmonious, and you didn't need an overtly huge amount of oak, just a bit of background oak, just, you know, some structure to the whole thing, and job done, you know. And for me, I would basically say the next time you do a bottling of the 12-year-old, please just do not bother with the recharred oak. It's not necessary. If you've got recharred oak casks you need to get shot of and do something with, well, do something different with them. But, you know, that's just my opinion, shall we say. Right, okay, so let's move on to the 15-year-old. So American oak and first fill Spanish oak. Let's see what those gives. It's quite a fair bit of sherry, but it's luscious. Dark syrup, edgy spices, touch of minerality, some raisinated fruit, ginger, almost kind of rye-like, darker spice notes as well. Yeah, there's quite a lot of sherry. There's more sherry than I remember, or more sherry character than I remember on, say, the 2000 vintage. I mean, there is a little bit of American oak that once the sherry sort of settles down a little bit, you get a little bit of the American oak, and a little bit of gooseberry, a little bit of lime, a bit more spirit character. So it's not swamped at all. I think you just sort of kind of need to leave it sitting in the glass, just to sort of allow the sherry notes just to sort of dissipate off a little bit, and then the balance comes together really quite well. A little bit of chocolate as well. I mean, that is a lovely nose. You know, see what it pants like. Again, kind of follows the path of the nose. It opens up with quite a bit of raisinated cherry fruit, very silky, very soft, very polished. Then in comes a sort of citrus and minerality, a little bit of walnut shell, chocolatey tannins. It starts to bitter a little bit on the mid palate, but never really gets too out of shape. That sort of light treacle and barley stops it becoming sort of overly bitter. There's a little bit of marmalade orange as well, and then towards the end the American oak sort of just starts to sort of poke its nose through and brings a little bit of barley, a bit of gooseberry, a bit of lime, and a bit more minerality. I mean, the progression on that is absolutely gorgeous. I mean, if it had sort of stayed the same, the sort of like, you know, chunky sherry, although quite complex and silky, it would have been a little bit on the dull side. But you have to love the progression. That's just just a lovely bottling, it has to be said. Right, okay, so let's move on to the 18-year-old. Let's see what the nose gives us on this end, shall we? Lovely. Obvious maturity straight off the bat. Mature sherry. It's got a lovely floral, dried fruit kind of note, sort of, again, a little bit of ginger, a bit of subtle American oak note kind of coming through. Again, I think the sort of the balance is very good. It's not quite as heavily sherried as the 15, or certainly the aromas don't seem quite so heavily sherried. Maybe it's the maturity, maybe it's a little bit more of that sort of oxidised fruit. A touch of orange, conserve, lime. I mean, that is a gorgeous nose. That is really complex and balanced. And that's what I want. If you're going to start using sherry casks, then what is the point of obliterating the spirit when you have such a lovely spirit like Balblair does? You just don't want to do that. And you know, John has just I think done an absolutely fantastic job with this bottling. Can't fault it. See what it passes like. Fresh, minerally, crisp, quite citric to start off with. Then in comes in the sherried fruit, the dried fruit, sultana, dried peach, a little bit of pear, a little bit of coffee on the mid palate, a little bit of chocolatey tannins, wonderfully soft. I mean, no bitterness whatsoever. A little bit of spice, that's what caught my throat right on the finish, it has to be said. It's that little spicy bite. A little bit of heatheriness in the aftertaste as well. I mean, you know, it is a lovely balance of different cask types and spirit characters. A little bit of Highland heatheriness as well, right on the finish. I mean, it is just so well balanced, and you know, to me, that's the sort of whiskey that I enjoy drinking. You know, I don't want to drink something that's overly oak dominated. Yet I don't want to drink something that has no oak at all. You know, it's all about the harmony, and I think so far, I think that is just sort of, you know, just absolutely spot on, absolutely fantastic. Right, okay, so finally we're on to the 25-year-old. Let's see what the nose gives us on this end, shall we? No, that's lovely. Lovely maturity. It's got that sort of cognac-y kind of dried fruit character, apple, cinnamon, ginger, a little bit of prune, walnut, citrus, wow, a little bit of leather, sandalwood, toffee. Just stunning, absolutely stunning. Yes, it's probably got a little bit more sherry characters. I would guess the finishing time has been quite considerable in the sherry cask, but again, the balance is sublime. Lovely mineral, fresh element to the nose. It is just undeniably brilliant whiskey, it has to be said. I mean, this is the sort of sherry matured spirit that I love. I don't want a thumping first fill Oloroso monster, even if it has had 30 or 40 odd years in it. I mean, this is just again wonderfully balanced. See what that's like. Wow, that's a hell of a finish. Juicy, soft, smooth. Again, has that cognac-esque kind of character, sort of dried apple, raisin, pear, touch of milk chocolate, touch of dark chocolate as well. Tobacco, sweet, slightly gingery spices, again a touch of sandalwood, lime. Elegant tannins, not too dry. I mean, that finish is just wonderfully moist and juicy with a lovely combination of minerality and raisinated fruit and a little bit of lime and citrus, and balance is just absolutely stunning. And yes, you would expect a whiskey that retails at that kind of price to be absolutely stunning, and sometimes they're not, but that is just unbelievably good. Stunning. Right, okay, so let's sum today's episode of the show up. Like I said, big thank you to Balblair and to Inverhouse for samples for today's episode of the show. Your continued support is appreciated. Yes, I know I buy the stuff. I mean, it is a two-way process at the end of the day, I suppose. And hopefully, I don't know. At the end of the day, you never know kind of what people think about your reviews, and I get obviously that you guys leave feedback on YouTube, but often I don't tend to hear back from distilleries and people like that about what they think, and I guess sometimes it's probably not a bad idea that I don't hear back from them, shall we say. But so anyway, a 12-year-old. It's not a bad whiskey at all. It's just I have reservations about it. As I've said, I really don't think there was a necessity to use Richard American oak at all. To me, it just kind of added a note that was just not really necessary and not really wanted at the end of the day. And like I said, although I would, like I said, always just don't take my word for it. Okay, give it a try, see what you think. I mean, personally, I think that next time they do a bottling of 12-year-old, they should sort of, just not use those casks, because, like I said, I just don't think it's necessary. But as for the other three, I mean, I just can't fault them. I mean, the 15-year-old was absolutely gorgeous. A little bit heavier on the sherry character than the bottlings or the bottling it replaced. But again, I can't argue with the balance. Exactly the same for the 18-year-old, which is probably the sweet spot if you're talking about value for money. Well, not that I'm saying that the 25-year-old isn't worth the price tag, but you know what I'm saying. If you're not the sort of person that can stretch to spending £400-500 on a bottle of whiskey, then the 18, which I'm guessing is probably going to be somewhere in the hundreds, is a good one to go for. So I've got no issue with the 25-year-old. Or the 18-year-old, I should say. The 25-year-old, well, yeah, okay, that is just stunningly good. If I had that sort of level of disposable income, I would be buying it. But unfortunately, I'm just a humble reviewer, and I don't have that sort of disposable income. But anyway, there you go. That's this week's episode of the show. I hope you've enjoyed it, and leave your comments and what have you, as per usual. I always attempt to sort of get round to answering questions and comments as quickly as possible. Well, there you go. Until next week, when I shall be basically I won't be doing both episodes. Well, I will be filming both episodes. I'll probably just be editing one, and then I'll edit the next one at some stage before Christmas. I think the next two are going to be interesting, and the Christmas one, like I said, I've got something quite special lined up. So anyway, not to say that this wasn't a special episode. Every episode is special, but you know what I mean. Anyway, so until next time, good afternoon and good ramming.